Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about world building. I just finished up my world building for a part in my story, and I have a lot of thoughts on what I did. If you haven't seen my first video yet on world building, I would suggest going back and watching that, then coming back here. I basically talked about what my goals were for world building, what I was getting into, and how I wanted to stay on a certain sort of timeline to make sure that I didn't stay in world building forever. I know a lot of us can probably fall into that. Honestly, I was never that much of a world building person. I just had a decent concept that I liked and I wanted to place my world in to tell a certain story, but I never thought it was like something that was spectacular. But I've gotten into the process and I'm really enjoying it, and it's actually going to take me a lot more time than I initially thought that it was going to. It's sort of taken almost all of my time. I've really enjoyed the process. So go back and watch that other video of how I sort of broke down each step, and I'll talk about what I learned, some new things that I'm trying to do, and yeah, so just new things that I've learned from that process. The first one is I need more time. I do need more time on this world building. I gave myself like 3 days per country, and I'm mainly only dealing with 2 sort of countries in this particular story, and it's taken me about a week to about 10 days to just work on one country. I thought I'd be able to get it done a little bit faster, but going into the world building process, I've really enjoyed it, like I said, and I've made a lot of connections that I didn't before when I wasn't doing this process. I don't want to get into too much of the details of my story, but I will give a little bit of a thing to give an example. So for an example, at the beginning of my story, my protagonist is going to this arena that is supposed to be like his launching point of being like a gladiator, basically. I also have this other world building element of these things called behemoths that are as big as these like grand cities, just monsters from another dimension that all their really existence is for is to destroy the ground. They feed off of mostly anything, and they'll eat the ground and they will like destroy entire towns, swallow entire towns. So they're like a force to be reckoned with. So I've actually taken both of these elements. Basically, this arena that my protagonist is supposed to be in is made out of the skeleton of one of these behemoth creatures, and it's just like I'm adding in these like different story elements in my setting to also work with my plot and things that are going on there, and also the history of the world. So that's just a little thing that I've sort of done in my world, and I really like it. I'm like, okay, this is like something that is unique about this world, and that's one of the things that when I go into specific settings in my world, I want them to be very distinct. I don't want them to come across like too gimmicky, but I was like, I think that's a cool story element. It's a cool setting thing that I wanted to do. And when I am going into my next few settings, I have ideas of how I want to make them unique. I've already done that with a few other places beforehand, especially with the capital of this country. It's called Farendell, the city of music. And obviously by that title, you could tell like probably what's going on in that city. And then I have the other one, which is like the city of gold, but I have a few like different things that are going on with that one. So that's some things that I've done with sort of the setting. Another thing that I have done, which I won't get into, more of spoilers for the book, but I have gone back in my sort of history of each nation, and why they're at conflict, and why everything that's going on, and why the current conflicts are at where they're at. So like I went back, let's say 500 years, and I sort of like started with very just bullet point things of like, here's where the current sort of like kingdoms, their foundation began and their nation began, or the seedlings of the nation began. And then around like 200 to 100 years ago, I did like the founding of that certain nation, and just a little bit more history. But the closer I got, more of that 100-year range to 50-year range was when I started to get more and more detailed, because I only want to write down sort of the story building that will work only for this sort of story, and I want to make sure that it's very consistent. Now when I get into other countries and all of that and a more in-depth of the story, I will go back and I'll make sure I add more and more here and there, but I only want to add in the details that will matter for this story so that I can stay focused, and I'm not like, I need to focus on the 500-year history. Like, no, like I just need to focus on here are the key events and points and details. And going through that, I actually made a lot of connections that give more motives to my characters of why they're doing what they're doing. I always had this in the back of my head. I didn't write this history consciously knowing that I had this element missing from my story. I sort of did it more subconsciously. So you might run into that sort of thing as well. There might not be things that are clicking for the story or motives or history or whatever, but going in and being able to do this world building of like breaking down the history, breaking down the settings and all of that, and really getting into the nuts and bolts of why you want it to be there and integrating it into your story is going to be crucial. So I added this really key element into the history that is going to add to the mystery that they're supposed to be figuring out throughout the story and the motives for some people of why they're doing what they're doing. I know it's like really vague, but I just wanted to say that the benefit of world building is you get to find these details that might have been missing in your story in the first place. At least that's what it is doing for me right now, which I really appreciate, and it's making my world much richer. It's making it distinct, it's making it stand out, and hopefully just benefiting the story altogether. Another big thing was, like I said, I've been working with my magic system for years now. A really funny thing is I basically spent the first part of my world building week just focusing on the magic system and making sure that it's something that I really want and that could stand through the test of how many books I want this series to be. And there's quite a bit of them. So I want to make sure there's a magic system that has enough freedom and leeway for me to do a lot with it, but has sort of core fundamental rules that you have to play within these sort of within this magic system, and I won't get any further into that. It's a very complex magic system, but also very simple at the same time. I will get into it later, but basically you can do a lot of things with this magic system, but there are key rules that you have to play by for it to actually work, and there's certain rules within the magic system. But I was able to flesh all of that out, and it's something that I've been working out for years. And funny enough, when I went back into my old documents of like 2016 or 2018, it was some of these fundamental things that I had forgotten, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I'm still using these certain elements because this is the magic system that I've always wanted to create. But basically I have 3 magic systems in my world. One is a more hard magic system, the other one's in between like hard and soft, and then there's a completely like soft magic system, and I'm really excited to play with all those different elements and add a whole bunch of mysteries and things to figure out throughout the story with that, and the history of the world, which it's part of Brandon's writing that I really like that he does. Also, Robert Jordan did this as well, and I hope to do my own sort of twist and new thing with it, because I love that writing. I love more of the Robert Jordan side of a magic system rather than Brandon Sanderson, and I'm playing in between both of those, so I'm excited to start implementing those in my world. If you don't know, I already have a book written that is set in this world, but I had a loose magic system with it that had these elements, but now I have a very concrete magic system, and it's helped me into my next topic, which is something that I didn't plan for, but the technology. I went wild with this one, and mainly thinking about sort of Brandon's work and how he implements technology into his magic, and I just went absolutely crazy with this one. It actually took like 2 full days to come up with the technology, but I really like what I'm working with. I am writing epic fantasy, but I find myself growing in more of a steampunk sort of environment. So it's epic fantasy with steampunk inspiration. It's not fully steampunk, and it's not like actually steampunk at all. I think Arcane also helped with this sort of thinking of magic and environment. So it's more of an Arcane sort of feel rather than steampunk. I guess you could say that's steampunk, I don't really know. But it's more of this, we're just beginning into this new age of technology, and what that means for society, and sort of, it's coming into like the industrial age, but I'm doing more of a like Victorian sort of feel, like Dishonored sort of thing. Yeah, along those lines. Still trying to figure out, but I'm running wild with the technology, and I'm really enjoying this process. And finally, after I've done all of that, I've taken a step back and I've gone, okay, how do I bring all of this together and make it all interweave and connect with each other, and also play into the themes that I'm trying to tell with my stories. So that it has been one of the most fun sort of processes, I guess is the right word. But I do start initially with my world building of my theme, of my characters, of what they're going through, and why I want to tell this certain story. And then I placate my world building towards that, if that makes sense. And then I just go back and I check and I make sure that all of this stuff is working for the betterment of the story. And it's working out really well so far. I've gotten my first country done. And the first country and second country are very interconnected. So I've kind of already written like half the stuff for the other country, and I'm working on that right now. The government system in my world, and I have also played into these roles that I had in society, these certain caste roles of the scholars and the guardians and that sort of thing. And I always had them as like a system of people that I wanted to use. They had their certain talents, but I didn't really know where I wanted to put them in society. And having to sit down and go over, okay, what does the government look like? What does the social structure look like for my country? I was able to go in and be like, okay, the scholars are going to be over more philosophical thought, experiments with the magic, and they're going to be in charge of the religion, which is also closely tied to the law. And it plays with a lot of themes with that. And then the guardians are going to be more of these people who are more militaristic. They're trying to protect the people. They're more of the policing force of the this sort of country. And what does that mean with everybody? I have the royals who are under the emperor, and how it gets very complex with the scholars who pass laws but also have to be interconnected with the royals or the partitions. And then also I have the ruling class, which is the emperor and the partitions, and just like the wealthy people or the royals, and how they all are influencing each other, causing this sort of game of houses or a Game of Thrones that is more going to be going on as a side part of my story, not really a main focus. But I love how interwoven it's gotten. Beforehand, it was just like, oh, I know all these groups of people are all, in the story this way somehow, but be able to go like, okay, I'm going to focus on Varanor's government. Okay, how do they run? What are their ideologies? How has religion influenced their like constitution, or what I call is their fundamentals that they all sort of live by and all of their laws branch from. But yeah, that's all of the nitty gritty sort of stuff that is detailed in my story that I want to eventually get to. But one of the things I just want to take away, like I said before, is building this magic system and being able to force myself to sit down for 2 hours every day to only focus on one aspect has helped me to just like force myself to think very creatively. And it doesn't happen all at once. I think one day I sat down for about an hour and nothing was coming to me, and then I just started throwing around my sort of inspirations of certain countries, and then it basically snowballed from there, and I just like was able to get into a rhythm. And then the next 4 hours I was like going into the world building, and it's still not perfect. There's still things that I have to go back and fix, but I just want to make sure all the core fundamental things are there and are working for my story for it all to logistically make sense. So when I'm writing the story, I don't have to worry about it being like, oh, does that part connect here or work there? And it's just fun doing this world building process. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for listening to my sort of process for world building. Next week I should be going into character and talking about my process and why I go into character and what I do. And then the week after that will be about, okay, how has it gone for my characters? What have I learned? That sort of thing going on. And then after that, I will be going into my outlining phase, taking from week 1 and 2 of doing breakdowns, and then coming back to you guys about that and talking about how that has gone. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys' books or writing are going well. If you're just interested in the process, I would love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.